How is everyone doing today? And in this video, we are going to do what we usually do every patch, which is going to be looking at the prydwen tier list in regards to all the changes they made, whether they put some characters up, whether they put some characters down, whenever they basically move around wherever Rappa is going to be. There's going to be a lot of stuff we're going to talk about today in regards to the tier list, and especially so because we are in a very interesting time, especially with 3.0 coming very soon. This is basically going to be the last few steps before we head into that with whatever new meta we're going to be looking at and seeing a bunch of changes, which is going to be very exciting for the most part. So let's go ahead and get straight into it inside prydwen's tier list, and we can already see there is a couple of changes already, which holy crap, there's a lot to go over this time around. And I'm really excited to be talking about this. I usually love looking at the tier list just to see what the consensus is in regards to the characters and then give my input on that. So we're going to go ahead and start really quickly with what it seems like no changes in the sustain tier. I do really think realistically that this should be fine. I do think these two deserve to stay at the top for right now. These guys are all good. Linkshell being in the same tier as Gallagher, I can understand it because this is E6 Gallagher, which is actually very strong, especially because of the weakness break efficiency or the toughness reduction efficiency. Linkshell's also a really good character at E0, which is really nice. Luocha being by himself here is pretty cool, but the only problem I have, I think realistically, is that Bailu and Japar are separate. I do think that these two are like really nice by themselves, whether you want to look at it or not. I do think Bailu and Japar as a sustain does work really well in a lot of the modes that we are currently in. I do think Bailu might have an edge over Japar just because although shields are better, way better than healing, I do think that Bailu's damage reduction is actually very overly slept on, especially for a lot of the enemies out at the current moment that don't really give crowd control, which makes it so that Bailu's actually able to heal with not having to worry about worrying about not having a cleanse. So there's a lot of stuff to look at when it comes to the sustains, but right now it hasn't changed, and rightfully so. There is not really a lot to disturb in this tier once it gets set in place. While we are busy talking about Rappa today, I would like to tell you the sponsor for today's video, which is Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN service that keeps your privacy and information safe 24/7, keeping you and all your info protected from anyone trying to get their hands on it. And this is possible with Surfshark's ability to allow you to browse the web while encrypting your internet activity. And another benefit of Surfshark is being able to watch content that isn't available where you live. Since you're playing Honkai Star Rail, I'm pretty sure you like anime, and with Surfshark, sites like Netflix actually don't allow certain shows to be shown in the United States. And if we use Surfshark and set our location to Japan, we are going to be met with a plethora of new shows for us to watch that wasn't available to us beforehand before we started using Surfshark. And this isn't all that Surfshark has to offer. Surfshark also can be used on any device, including your phone and PC, and has 24/7 customer support, allowing any problem you may have to be resolved instantly when you need it. Now, if this all interests you, make sure to go try their risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee, which you can try it out and see if you like it, which you can go into my link in my description, pinned comment, or by going to surfshark.com/REHOO. Thank you so much, Surfshark, for sponsoring this video, and let's get right back into it. Let's go ahead and get into the damage dealer, which I'm pretty sure everyone wants to look at. And one of the main things we are going to look at is that Fei Xiao is alone at tier 0, and Acheron was brought down one by into 0.5. So I do have a problem with this realistically, and I know some people realistically, and I don't blame you. I do love me some Acheron 100%. But I don't want to say that I'm biased because I love a lot of characters in this game. And even if I were to say, by example, I hate Fei Xiao, but I love Acheron, that doesn't mean I'm going to put Fei Xiao in tier 1, tier 2 when it comes to her power, because we all know without a doubt that Fei Xiao is absolutely absurd. She's by far one of the craziest characters in the game, especially for the archetype that she's in right now, which is follow-up, and follow-up right now is just killing it. They have a tier 0 support, they have a Topaz now, they also have Aventurine, who's a god tier character. A lot of the characters that are out in the game right now when it comes to the follow-up archetype are some of the best characters in the game, and it's only a matter of time before maybe we get a tier 0 follow-up character that is going to be a buffer like Topaz, or maybe even crazier. We'll have no idea when that's going to come, but realistically, the main team for follow-up is all basically in the higher tiers of the game, and they're all really great characters. They synergize with each other perfectly. Fei Xiao works with everyone that does follow-ups and regularly fast attacks. Topaz able to do attacks. Topaz gives support for follow-up attacks, which Fei Xiao gets from her ultimate. Robin gives all that follow-up stuff. Aventurine gives a crit buff. Infinite shield. There's just so much that Fei Xiao gets because she is a part of that follow-up team. Now, this is one thing that no one can take away from her. She's tier 0 without a doubt. Acheron, on the other hand, this is E0 Acheron, which a lot of people like to say realistically. But when looking at Acheron, I don't agree that she was moved down one. Only because realistically, I would not put her next to Yunli and Ratio. I do think Yunli and Ratio are really nice characters. I really do think that Ratio is by far one of the coolest characters for us to grab, especially for free when he came out initially, and he's been this good. Like, he's still over here deleting bosses, which is really nice, and especially because, again, the follow-up team has been brought up for quite some time. He's doing really well. Same thing goes for someone like Yunli. Yunli has been able to benefit from a lot of these characters that have been out in the game for a long time, like REHOO, like Robin, Ting Yun, of course, and they're making Yunli's job so much easier, being able to spam ultimate, get as much damage out of it as possible, and it's a really good thing for her. And she has a self-sustaining kit when it comes to healing herself. She has CC cleanse when she's in her parry state. It's a lot of really good stuff with Yunli that makes her great. But I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like Acheron is where these guys are at, because I don't think that's the case. I do think realistically that Fei Xiao and Acheron are just a new generation of DPS, or the super DPSs of the game. When you look at Fei Xiao, when you look at Acheron, yes, Fei Xiao may have more support. Fei Xiao has some of the better characters in the follow-up archetype, but Acheron, in a similar fashion, is able to do the same thing. Yunli and Dr. Ratio, whether, let's say, a bunch of characters come out, we don't know when they'll get their next buffs because they're static characters. While someone like Acheron and Fei Xiao gets a buff anytime someone gets to do a follow-up, or anytime a character comes out that has the potential to do a follow-up or has the potential to advance forward themselves. Same thing goes for Acheron. Any character that's able to give a debuff, and this doesn't have to be specifically for someone in the agility path, because yes, when you look at someone like Topaz, she's able to give debuffs. She's able to give stacks for Acheron. Now, of course, you want the double nihility for the damage boost, so I understand that. But even more so, if another nihility unit comes out, they're able to do debuffs, let's say even faster than Jiao Shou. Now you have Jiao Shou, you have this new character, and boom, Acheron's able to do some crazy work. I think Acheron is still able to do crazy work with having someone like Pella, with having someone like Silver Wolf, because now you have two nasty forms of defense reduction and being able to have a crap ton of extra damage from that. And then you also have other teams like Dockeron, where you have Kafka and also Black Swan, reducing the resistances, being able to have these nasty dots pop, while also having Acheron in the background being able to load up her ultimate while all this dot damage is happening. I do think realistically, when a person looks at this tier list and they see someone like Acheron, Ratio, and Yunli together, it kind of doesn't make sense, because realistically, if a new player were to come in and say, yo, I want to go look at who the best characters are, and let's say that Ratio and Acheron are going to be rerunning, let's say at the same time, and they pull for Ratio because apparently Ratio is the same tier as Acheron, and then we get a brand new nihility support in the future, we get a brand new nihility character, and now Acheron's at the top again, or Acheron's right there with Fei Xiao in being some of the best characters in the game. I do think characters like Yunli and also Ratio are a little bit more static when it comes to their power incline. Either they're going to stay at the same level for a very long time, or they might get a little bit of a bump next time another character comes out. While someone like Acheron, she's always going to have a slope upwards when it comes to her investment potential and how strong she can be, because any unit that comes out that can debuff is going to be a potential teammate for Acheron, and can definitely be a huge synergy for her, because she's still hitting for some crazy damage regardless, and also has a way to lower all resistances and also colorless toughness reduction, which is a really cool thing to have. So I do think realistically that Fei Xiao and Acheron should definitely still be at tier 0 together, because looking at the thresholds of power, if you look at it like a power meter or a power scaler, let's say that Ratio and Yunli have 100,000 power, right? They're still really great characters. Acheron, just because she has 500,000 power, and let's say Fei Xiao has 1 million, that doesn't mean that Acheron has to be dropped down because let's say Fei Xiao has 2 times her power. She's still 400,000 power more than Yun Li in ratio. So I don't know. I do think realistically that the Acheron lowering is a little bit too much for right now. I don't think, even though the follow-up team has been built up to what it is, because yes, it is super good at the current moment alongside Break at the moment, that doesn't mean that Acheron doesn't have the potential to come back up in regards to the characters that can come out for her. And it doesn't mean that just because the characters that are currently out, like Kafka, Black Swan, Petal, Silver Wolf, just because those finite characters are there right now, doesn't mean that she has to be brought down with Ratio and Yun Li. Because if this is the case, we need to bring down Ratio and Yun Li. And that's no hate towards them, because I really do love both of these characters. But realistically, I cannot put Acheron next to Dr. Ratio and Yun Li, me personally. Going into the next one, Blade being moved up 1 and also Jingliu being moved down. Now, I can see Jingliu being moved down because as time goes by, these characters are getting increasingly difficult to clear the current MOC. But Dan Heng being up there still as well, it's a little bit of a confusing look, just because I think Jingliu and Dan Heng share more similarities than not when it comes to their performances. We have seen, realistically, we have seen a lot of imaginary weak characters because of the break meta. So this has indirectly helped out Dan Heng stay relevant in the meta at the current moment. So that's probably why he hasn't moved a tier. But realistically, once we start phasing out the break meta and we get whatever else we're getting in the future, I do think they might move him down right where Jingliu is. But moving up Blade, although he's my homie, my favorite character in the dang game, probably one of my favorite playstyles in the game besides Yun Li herself, Blade moving up 1 is probably not my intended look on this. Now, I have seen some people pull out certain teams that do allow him to clear out MOC, and apparently one of them is Blade Super Break. I'm not gonna lie, at that point, if it's a Blade Super Break team and it's like the Ruame, HMC Linksha, I'm not gonna lie, having Blade on that team isn't really Blade anymore. It's kind of like those 3 and Blade so happens to just do damage for that team. I don't know, it just feels weird. I don't think realistically I'd put Blade and Jingliu in the same tier, because Blade is just, he's kind of like far from saving at the current moment, in my honest opinion. So I really don't know much else to say about him moving up. I honestly would keep him down here. But looking at the next one, which is going to be Sele being moved down on, holy crap, is this insane. I think Sele being moved to where Jinkyuan and Chingche is absolutely wild. We have been seeing, I think ever since the game has come out, that there has been a 0 cycle with Sele at E0, S0 for like the longest amount of time, or S1 I think. And she's been able to 0 cycle every single freaking MOC that's been out since the beginning of the game, which that's a pretty crazy feat. Now, I know this tier list realistically is quote unquote E0 with the 5-star Lycons that are free and also the 4-star Lycons. I'm not gonna lie, if that was the case, man, a lot of these characters would be moved down without their signature. So I don't know if prydwen wants to keep that stipulation, because I feel like everyone just auto defaults to looking at it with the signature, which I don't know, it's gonna be weird to see how this works out. But looking at Sele being this far down alongside these guys, it is kind of crazy. I do think Himiko as well, with the break meta at the current moment, she's been doing some work, especially with the exo toughness MOC that we're currently seeing. I would be inclined, not gonna lie, moving her up to tier 1. Himiko to tier 1 actually makes a lot of sense, especially if we're gonna keep a lot of these fire weak enemies, because we have been seeing fire be part of the MOC 12 for quite some time, because of Firefly, because of Linksha being the next few bosses, which are the choir, and now we have exo toughness as well, helping out someone like Himiko. There's a lot of really good stuff that comes out of these MOCs that are helping out Himiko a crap ton. So I would put Himiko in tier 1 right now, just because she has been seeing so much play, so much support, so many benefits across the board at the current moment in regards to her playstyle, that it looks really good for her right now. So I really do think someone like Himiko should be moved up to tier 1 right now, because she is doing really well for herself inside the meta. Argenti sadly hasn't had the chance to be able to shine for the most part. Needs a lot of enemies and needs a consistent amount of enemies to be able to spam his ultimate, which his ultimate hits like a truck, but sadly it just doesn't work that way in regards to getting that energy for him. So he's going to stay down there, and then everyone else is here. Going into the specialist, we see that Rappa is in tier 1. Now, Rappa being in tier 1, I can see it. I can definitely see it. I do think she's very strong. I do think Rappa is a really good character. There are a couple of things realistically I do want to nitpick on Rappa after using for a bit. I do think she's very strong. Regardless, I do think she can do a crap ton of damage, and she is by far one of the coolest characters in my honest opinion. But there are some things that hurt her, and I think it, for the most part, sucks that she has these issues. She is, which this is a broken record by now in regards to talking about Rappa and seeing what is wrong with her. She doesn't have implant on her own weakness, which for the most part, it's not a big issue because realistically, as I've heard a lot of people say, if you're going to use Rappa, you're using on an imaginary weakness enemy, which makes a lot of sense, yes. But the only problem is that someone like Firefly, someone like Boohill have their implant for majority of the time that they're going against most enemies. And that's a pretty big plus. I would assume a lot of the 5 stars to come out that are break oriented would have their implant. Now, I don't think she's bad because she doesn't have it, but this does limit the amount of content that you can do without that weakness. And there are some workarounds that you can do to make this work with having Rappa, like having someone like Boohill being able to shred the toughness of a lot of characters on the field, having another DPS being able to, like, again, help you with that toughness, and then allowing Rappa to break that way, or being able to use her super break once you break them with those other characters. So there are workarounds to playing with Rappa that you can use her on teams that don't necessarily match the weakness of the enemy. So that's a pretty cool thing. I do think it is going to take a little bit more support, especially because after Exo Toughness leaves, after all these imaginary weak enemies aren't in rotation anymore, it's going to be slightly harder to use Rappa if you're not implementing a lot of these characters that are basically reducing the toughness themselves really quickly, like someone like Boohill or any other sub DPS or DPS you're going to have on the team. I think Rappa is a really good character, just held back currently with the generic team building of most teams. She needs to have either another teammate that's able to reduce toughness very quickly for you, or she just needs to have that imaginary weak, which restricts her teams or enemies that she can go against, in opposed to someone like Boohill or Firefly, where they can just go to whatever you want to fight and then just go ahead and do damage to them that way, because they have implant, especially Firefly, because she can just use her technique and boom, she's done. Everybody has fire, which I find kind of crazy. Kafka and Black Swan being moved down 1, which I can see why Kafka would be moved down 100%. Kafka being moved down makes 1000% sense because we haven't seen dot support in like millions of years, and it kind of sucks because I think this was by far a lot of people's like favorite team to rock, especially with that comparison to Follow Up. Follow Up was definitely a fan favorite, and so was Dot, and funny to see that Dot hasn't seen a lot of play. I don't think this is E0 Swan. E1 Swan would be up here with 0.5 100%, but with E0 Swan, you're only using her realistically for the most part with Dot. So seeing these two get moved down, just because break and follow-up has just been so prevalent, they've been seeing so much support, it's kind of insane. And we haven't seen anything from Dot in a bit. I can't wait to see whatever Dot support is going to come out and where these two are going to get placed up. But right now, it just makes sense that these guys did get pushed down as far as they did, just because we just haven't seen any support for them. Luca and also Shui. We've just seen so many good break characters to come out. We even have someone like March 7, who's such a good character, who's able to mirror a character's weakness, which is super freaking cool. Having imaginary plus another element for breaking is really nice, so that does move down Shui and a lot of the break units that are really great. Luca, again, Dot units that are just not being able to be used just because we haven't seen a lot of play, we haven't seen a lot of support for them. There's kind of no reason to use Luca, and plus you can use Boohill, question mark. Imagine Boohill with Kafka, holy, that'd be some nasty breaking. And then you have Fire MC as a sustain. I'm surprised that Fire MC is over here as a specialist character, because realistically most people are just going to use him for sustain, but other than that there's not really much else to use him. I feel like he was over here at some point, but yeah, Fire MC being put in the Forgotten Ones 100% makes sense. It's crazy to see how the mighty have fallen in regards to, at the beginning of the game, used by everybody. Every single person was using Fire MC. Now no one uses it, which is kind of crazy to see. Going into the specialist, or amplifier tier, my bad, we see that Bronya was moved up, Pella was moved up, and Sparkle was moved down. Now, Sparkle being moved down makes sense. Hyper Carry just hasn't been the hype when it comes to the teams that are usually taking out these MOCs. We've seen a lot of break. We've seen a lot of follow-up. These guys have their dedicated supports like Robin and Ruan Mei, so that's that. And then Hyper Carry realistically just has someone like Imbibitor Lune, Jingli Yu maybe? I don't know. A lot of people use Bronya realistically for this. And maybe Jing Yuan. There's just not a lot of characters that Sparkle can really push through with as her kit intends, so there's really no reason to keep her up here with Jiao Shou, who's just such a good debuffer, and HMC, who's absolutely busted. Pella being moved up, hey, good for her, because she has been one of the better characters in the game for a very long time, especially with her defense reduced and her debuff generation for someone like Acheron. So it is a really cool thing to see that she's getting time to shine slightly, just because of how good she's been since the game has come out. So it's kind of crazy to see that this is the first time we're seeing her like this far up, which is kind of cool. And then Bronya being moved up one, I kind of don't know why she's being moved up one. Realistically, I have seen, for the most part, Bronya being used as much as Sparkle realistically, especially with the -1 speed setup, so I can see why Bronya would be moved up here. She's just been a really great character since the start of the game, has been a really nice and solid character. If you were to pull a Bronya, or you were to get Eidolons, really good character realistically. And then Yukong is being put in the Forgotten Ones. You know, I find this funny looking at Yukong and then having an empty space there. Now, I'm not disagreeing that Yukong deserves to be there, because hey, Yukong slander all the way. But I do find it funny, the difference between CN and us, because realistically I think in CN Yukong would be like, oh, somewhere up here. I don't know. There's certain characters like Sele where Yukong is just god tier character. So seeing that she's basically at the bottom tier for us, and she might be like in the top tiers for CN because of Sele and the abuse that they can basically repeat buffs non-stop with having Sele and Yukong on the team, you can get some crazy stuff to happen. I've seen some crazy showcases from CN, and man, that's some wild stuff that they can do over there. So it's funny to see the difference, but hey, I'm okay with her being put all the way down there. And then we already talked about sustain, so that's pretty much it when it comes to all the things regarding this tier list. I do believe that Acheron should be moved back up. Blade, I don't know how you got an up arrow on you. Jingli Yu, understandable. I think for Dan Hong, he's being carried right now with the enemy rotation at the current moment, but once that leaves, that man is out. And then Sele being moved down is crazy. Other than that, everything else makes a lot of sense. Rappa's placement makes sense because I don't know about her being better than Boohill realistically, and then the supports balancing out makes a lot of sense. I'm surprised seeing Yuna still tier 1. Not gonna lie, I would still see her as 0.5 just because she's used in every effing team. Like, she's just been such a generational unit, it's not even funny. So other than that, that's gonna be it for this video when it comes to Star Rail. Let me know what you think about all the stuff that's inside the meta right now in terms of the tier list. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. See you on the next one, and peace.